Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell, and since the beginning of the pandemic, the idea of a universal basic income or a guaranteed livable income has been a topic of wide debate, certainly since the various pandemic supports such as the CERB and the CRB have been implemented. But even though certain parties have hinted at and teased the idea of how they'd handle a universal basic income, in some recently released interviews, including interviews with Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, we have some more detailed information on exactly what their UBI or guaranteed livable income plan is. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at some of these clips, and you're going to see Trudeau asked point blank what his position on UBI is, and we're going to take a look at what some other parties have committed to in terms of a guaranteed livable income, and also we're going to take a look at some potential alternatives to UBI that the Prime Minister seems to be suggesting. But before we dive in, if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep on supporting Canadian content created right here on the YouTube platform, and check out all the links in the description where you can open up various investing accounts to start taking your financial future into your own hands. All right, let's dive into this and take a look at some of the history of the guaranteed livable income or UBI idea inside of the Liberal Party, and they've been rather supportive of it as of late. In a moment, we're going to listen in on some direct comments from Justin Trudeau, but first you need this context. Now, earlier this year, there was a Liberal National Policy Convention, and essentially at this policy convention, a whole bunch of Liberals come together to vote on what they want to be included in their policies as a party going forward, or at the very least what they want to be considered. And you might be surprised that they voted through three different motions, or three different proposals they were voted on and were successfully voted through that contain things that mention a UBI and how they want to include that in the Liberal platform. The first UBI policy voted through at this convention has some resolutions or some things that it wants to say in conclusion of the policy. Let me read it to you here. They say, be it resolved that through a process of intersectional consultation with stakeholders and political parties, the Government of Canada will introduce a UBI for all Canadians. And be it further resolved that given the success of the CERB program, that UBI will assist seniors and low-income Canadians maintain an adequate standard of living regardless of their working status. The second policy voted through, titled A Canadian Basic Income Rethinking Canada's Tomorrow, had some similar resolutions, though a little less strongly worded. They said that be it resolved that the Liberal Party of Canada urged the Government of Canada to conduct a basic income cost-benefit analysis, including reviews of basic income projects and studies by subject matter experts. They also want to explore streamlining the current federal income supports while maintaining those for distinct needs, adjusting for regional differences and identifying new revenue sources, and also to work with provinces, territories, and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit to develop and implement a basic income guarantee. So essentially they want to do more studies to get more information on how they could actually roll out a UBI in the future. And the final policy voted through at this Liberal convention was titled Guaranteed Income for Families Affected by Disability. They said, be it resolved that the Liberal Party of Canada urged the Government of Canada to provide a basic income to support the work and initiatives found in the poverty reduction strategy. They also want to make sure that the Government of Canada will implement a negative income tax to implement basic income, another strategy for implementing a basic income, a poverty reduction strategy, as well as they want the Liberal Party of Canada to urge the Government of Canada to intervene in this provincial jurisdiction as it did for universal healthcare issuance, because some people will argue that the provinces should be the ones to implement a universal basic income or an income support like this. And finally, be it further resolved that the Liberal Party of Canada urge the Government of Canada to match each dollar that the provinces and territories provide as assured income for the severely handicapped up to $2,500 per month. And if that wasn't enough support for a UBI coming out of the Liberal Party, well, a Liberal MP from Toronto actually put forward legislation, an actual bill that was in support of a universal basic income. This is from Julie Zerowitz, and it's Bill C-273, an act to establish a national strategy for a guaranteed basic income. Now, a lot of people got their hopes up about this bill, and I don't really understand why they got their hopes up, because this was always just a bill to force the finance minister to do more active studies about UBI, not to actually implement it, but many people sort of rallied behind this bill as if it was going to actually implement a UBI rather than just being more about future studies. All of this is just to say that all of these indicators are pointing towards more and more support of a universal basic income, or at the very least a guaranteed livable income, coming out of the Liberal Party of Canada. But given all this information, you're going to be rather surprised when you listen in on this question that Justin Trudeau was recently asked by Rosemary Barton in a recent interview, where she asks point blank, hey, what is your position on a universal basic income? Let's listen in.
I'm going to ask one more question about basic income, because that is something that has come up through the pandemic. Would we be better off giving a minimum support to everyone that needs it. Your party is interested in the idea, has voted to consider it, and I wonder if there are any circumstances under which you would consider some kind of guaranteed livable income.
I think that's something we've already worked on in a number of different ways. Because you have to recognize that people's needs are totally different. You know, Ty makes the same salary whether he has no kids or whether he has 3 kids. We don't adjust the salaries we pay to people. People have different needs. That's why we move forward with the Canada Child Benefit, for example, that gives more money to the families that need it and didn't send the checks that the previous government was sending to the wealthiest. We're boosting supports for seniors on OAS and on GIS so that they have a better ability.
This sounds like a no. This sounds like you're not interested in the basic income.
I am interested in a more complex version that says we're going to give more money with the Canada Workers Benefit to people who are making minimum wage so that they can actually get a benefit. So
but that's my point. You want targeted supports. You don't want a broad-based support that goes to everybody.
But going to everyone means necessarily some people will get more than they need and some people won't get what they need. That's where, with a government that we've been able to demonstrate can deliver concretely for people, targeting is better than universal.
So obviously there's a lot to break down there, and it's interesting to hear Trudeau talk on this from his point of view. He seems to believe that implementing a universal basic income that would go out broadly to everybody is not the right approach, even though there is so much support inside the Liberal Party for a system like this. Instead, Justin Trudeau is more focused on targeting individual at-risk groups, like seniors and like young families that may have multiple children, like the Canada Child Benefit, which keeps on getting increased, more money going to families dependent on how many children they have. Instead, targeting those families that might need more help rather than giving out a blank or a equal check to every single person that may not support all of the needs for some and maybe actually too much support for others. It was a little bit interesting that he said he was interested in a more complex system to allow for this individual targeting, because one of the biggest things that UBI supporters will say is like, hey, we could save a whole lot of money if we were to just simplify these complex systems that require so many people in government to be working on them. We could save a lot of administrative costs by sort of bringing these all into one centralized benefit that could go out to multiple people. This is what many UBI supporters will shout when they hear Justin Trudeau saying they want more complexity. But the Liberals weren't the only ones to make new comments on universal basic income, or a GLI. Also, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, in a very similar interview, answered a question about how his party might help support Canadians living with disabilities, and it sounds like a guaranteed livable income is his potential answer. And don't worry, this is going to connect to all Canadians as well, because the NDP are actually planning on expanding this program further into the future. But I'll explain that in just a moment. Let's listen into this interview question.
One of the things that we've said in our platform, and I'm committing to, is that we would immediately implement guaranteed income for people living with disabilities of $2,200 a month, just as a starting point to lift people into a position of dignity so that people don't have to worry about making ends meet. And as you were shared with your personal story, can pursue education and training. But we really believe that's a starting point to provide people with that direct financial support.
So we hear Jagmeet Singh of the NDP commit to a $2,200 per month guaranteed livable income for Canadians living with a disability, and this is actually inside of his platform as well. Right here is this is where he sort of says that he wants to make sure that there's an income security programs to ensure that Canadians living with a disability have a guaranteed livable income. But he actually expands this past the guaranteed livable income for only people with living with disabilities. Right here in this next section of the platform, when they said that in time, it's right here, let me zoom in time, New Democrats will work to expand all income security programs to ensure everyone in Canada has access to a guaranteed livable basic income. Everyone in Canada, making the creation of a guaranteed livable basic income a priority will strengthen our social safety net and finally ensure dignity, security, and peace of mind for everyone in Canada. So they're really leaning into this guaranteed livable basic income, like a GLI, rather than a UBI, meaning that, again, this may be a targeted support instead of a broad support that goes to everybody, sort of targeting people who are most vulnerable, potentially below a certain income threshold, or in this case, targeting people who are struggling and living with disabilities. And in terms of the amount for this guaranteed livable income, well, in that interview, he did say $2,200 for people living with disabilities, but inside of this, his platform as well, it also says that he's planning to make an EI support, a low-income supplement, so that no one who's relying on on EI, regular or special benefits to stay afloat, receives less than $2,000 a month. So it certainly seems that Jagmeet Singh believes that $2,000 is the absolute minimum threshold for a livable income. So if they expand this to low-income Canadians, this could also be a similar threshold. Of course, Jagmeet Singh and the NDP say that he's going to tax the wealthiest Canadians and tax the biggest businesses and global businesses that currently aren't paying taxes in Canada to allow to have the additional revenue to implement a program like this. But the criticism is that it remains to be seen on whether these measures would actually work. Many people believe that if you implement higher taxes on the wealthy, much like what happened in France when they did the same, many wealthy Canadians may just choose to live in a different country that are more tax favorable for wealthy Canadians, or find other tax loopholes that allow them to store their wealth in ways that doesn't allow for their tax to be, or their wealth to be taxed at a 1% rate each year. So of course there's always the question on how we're going to pay for different programs like this, but that more and more seems like an abstract question to ask when worldwide governments are relying on their central banks to add more currency to the system to finance more government spending, but that's a topic for another video. But on a similar topic, the Conservative government, well, they don't mention a universal basic income or a guaranteed livable income. No, they want to add improve the broader social safety net and give more supports to low-income Canadians who are currently working. The Conservatives want to pump up the Canada Workers Benefit up to a maximum of $2,800 for individuals each year, and they want to pay this as a direct quarterly deposit into bank accounts instead of a tax refund at the end of the year. This will only apply, though, to the lowest income Canadians, saying that it would be equivalent to giving someone who's currently making $20,000 per year a $1 per hour raise across the entire year. And if we zoom out a little bit here and scroll down, there's also various other income supports and other various social safety net implemented measures that they want to put into place, such as the Super EI, as well as security for gig economy workers, supporting workers suffering from illness, helping workers who have to move temporarily, a number of measures. I've already made a video on Super EI. I'll link it. It should be like covering my face right now if I remember to put the card in there, but you can check that out if you want more details here. But all this to say that the Conservative government it hasn't really mentioned here any sort of guaranteed livable income or universal basic income, but rather, much like it sounds like Justin Trudeau and the Liberals want to do, wants to target sectors and individuals and certain portions of the population that most need help and provide help in that way. And I find it very interesting to take a look at each of these different platforms and see what kind of supports they'd be planning. But I will say this, anytime I make a video on these platforms, historically, not everything that's included in a platform has been actually implemented by the government. Potentially, things may be harder to implement than they were previously thinking. So we have to take all of this with a grain of salt, and you have to also weigh your decision on who you're going to vote for based on who you think can actually execute and make the plans that they're putting forth actually happen. And that makes me curious, what do you think of all of this? Which parties do you think can actually implement plans like these? Do you think that the NDP plan of implementing a guaranteed livable income for people with disabilities and for seniors as a start to more broadly expand that in the future is a good idea? Or do you think the Liberals and also the Conservatives' more targeted approach to supporting individuals is the best way to go for Canada? And a quick reminder that I will be holding an election live stream. I'd love to see you there with me. If you're on a web browser or on your phone, you can search for Russell Matthews, and when you search for me, it will likely come up here with a live election stream thumbnail. You can click the button right here to set a reminder, and when you set that reminder, it will send a push notification to your phone when we go live, so you can make sure that you can tune in and hang out with us on election night so we can see which way things are going. I think I'm probably gonna have a couple drinks over the course of the night, so that could be fun. I'd love to see you there. I always get to know people a little bit more in those live streams. But with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.